I'm about to make a controversial statement. Sherlock, once upon a time, was really fucking good. I know. Shocking, isn't it? But before it went the way of Game of Thrones in the eyes of the internet, Sherlock was genuinely one of the wittiest, most smartly written, and one of the most entertaining shows out there. And today, I'm going to try and give some love back to this early 2010s classic by going over one of its best scenes. When picking which villain to talk about for this project, I had a lot to choose from. Should I champion my love of fanfiction by talking about some of their standout scenes? Should I return to my childhood and give some love to an obscure villain that, for me, still stands as the ultimate example of an anime rival? But no. Ultimately, I knew there could only be one true winner. Jim Moriarty, my all-time favourite villain, and the scene that cemented that fact. So I'm going to try to set the stage. First, while this scene is our first time meeting Moriarty in person, it's not necessarily an introduction to him. He's first mentioned at the end of the premiere episode, described as more than a man. His name only spoken by the dying villain under pain of torture. Already we get hints about the kind of person Moriarty is and the kind of presence and power he has. Also, I'd be burned alive in the comments if I didn't mention the excellent red herring of Sherlock's brother Mycroft acting in a way that made many of us assume he was Moriarty. I'll just say that while Mark Gatiss' performance would have made an excellent villain in his own right, the real Moriarty works on an entirely different level. Moving on, in the second episode, The Blind Banker, In the second episode, The Great Game, we have our first encounter with Moriarty as he kidnaps people, straps into Semtex, and talks through their terrified voice. I love this. This is one of the most sick, callous, and disturbing things I've seen from a villain. On a very spiritual and psychological level, it's a complete violation of his victims. Not only are they physically assaulted, kidnapped, and terrified they're about to die, but their very voice, their way of expressing themselves, communicating to the world, expressing their identity, is stolen from them and used by the very person who is traumatizing them in the first place. It completely dehumanizes these people. It turns them into literally just objects, game pieces for him. It is a disregard of their most basic individuality. I still get chills just remembering it. And the fact that this is done by such mundane methods as coercion, pages, semtex, etc., makes it so much more horrifying than if it were a fantastical power like mind control or an alien parasite. No, not because you can really imagine it happening to you in real life. I hate that stupid critiquing cliche. No, what makes this horrifying is it took effort. It took time to set up and prepare. A sorcerer can just magic you into being a puppet, but this, Moriarty had all the time to think about what he was doing, and not once did the cries of his victims ever even enter into his thoughts. It is the horror of systematic, industrialized, dehumanizing evil manifested into a single heartless character, an expression of a horrifying philosophy. I can hurt you, because nothing about you matters to me. And can you believe we're not even on my favourite scene yet? So, what kind of villain is Moriarty when we first meet him? What hatred lurks in his heart? What man of sombre cruelty and emotionless murder is a man who would so callously treat the lives of...
Now you're in my way.
Thank you.
Didn't mean it as a compliment.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay, I did.
Daddy's had enough now.
I could have got them anywhere.
Sherlock, run!
Oh, good. Very good. Westwood.
If there was any scene that could have followed the bomb scenes, this was it. If I were to show you this scene out of context, Say I was a hack YouTuber trying to convince you about how bad the show was with a dishonest and insincere analysis that cherry-picked scenes to suit my point, you might easily be convinced that this is a terrible villain. After all, in this supposedly serious, realistic detective story, in waltzes this cartoonish Disney villain with a funny accent? On the surface, it doesn't fit at all. But my friends, that, in the all-important context, is what makes this so perfect. First, I want to correct a possible presumption. To be clear, Moriarty is not a cartoon Disney villain. No, Moriarty is the cartoon Disney villain. He is that archetype in its purest, most elegantly perfected form, transported directly into our world. The immediate thing that stood out to me about this scene, and what makes it work so well, is how completely casual Moriarty is being. Look at his body language, his tone. He is completely at ease. His words are conversational. They're even playful. I'll go into this more later, but something I've come to learn about Moriarty is that despite being a style of villain often stereotyped as flat and one-dimensional, he conveys so much personality and character in the simplest of ways. Let's break down this attitude and what it says about our villain. First of all, it shows power. Despite the way he is acting, Moriarty is being held at gunpoint. He's not a martial arts expert, a super fast ninja, or a Superman. His life is in mortal danger at this very moment, and the only vague assurance he has of his safety is that Sherlock will be too intimidated by Moriarty's own sniper to fire his shot. Little comfort when someone's pointing a gun at you. And yet he shows absolutely no fear. This is not the shallow, cowardly insecurity of bravado or arrogance. This is confidence, assurance of his own power. This is a man who sees your attempts to fight him and merely raises an eyebrow.
What if I was to shoot you now? Right now?
Then you could cherish the look of surprise on my face. Because I'd be surprised, Sherlock. Really, I would. I'm just a teensy bit disappointed.
Not only confidence, it shows competence. In previous scenes, he has shown ingenuity that even Sherlock admires, and here, he controls the scene both from an acting and a very literal perspective. Do not be fooled by his theatricality. This Moriarty is every bit the calculating planner that his original incarnation was. There is no loss of intelligence here. Let's take this a step further. I've already spoken about the horrific things our villain does to people and the callous way he treats them. Well, this is an extension of that. He treats it all as a game. It's a hobby for him, a passing diversion, mere entertainment. When discussing villains, one of the most important questions we ask of them is, why? Why do they do the awful things they do? In fiction, entire scenes are given to a villain declaring their motive to the world. This is why they do what they do. And yet...
Why does anyone do anything? Because I'm bored.
There are many things that people do on a whim. For many of you who found this video, or even this channel, I imagine that it might have been a result of casual channel surfing. A free afternoon you decided to enjoy clicking on random YouTube videos that caught your interest. For the creative among you, I'm sure you've made something weird just because at one time or another. These actions did not have a higher purpose, deep personal emotion, or some grand philosophy behind them. The motives were simple, ordinary, and so casual that if asked, why did you do it? Most of you probably answer, I don't know, it just felt like it. So where am I going with this? Well, human beings have a fantastic capacity for empathy. And nowhere is that better shown in our capacity to empathize with people who don't even exist. When we look at fiction, we like to put ourselves in the character's shoes. Imagine what we would do in their position. And ultimately, even in the real life, the question of why comes from a need for validation. We put ourselves in the character's shoes, and by doing so, I think sometimes we imagine ourselves suffering their fates. Or, on some level, we imagine those who would harm the characters existing in the real world. If we were to die, if we were to suffer a horrible fate, we want it to be for a good reason. Religion, the belief that our lives have purpose, is part of this need for validation. Our lives cannot be random, and surely no one would end it for no reason, because we are human beings. We are people with our own lives, thoughts, ambitions, and each and every one of us means more than some idle purchase or something you do on a whim. We can't die just because. Our death had to have had meaning, a purpose, a reason for it. We can't die just for no reason, just because of a whim. No, someone had to have killing us. A human life is a big deal, and therefore taking a human life must be a big deal too. It must have some important reason. We have to die for a good reason because we're special. Aren't we? Oh, to Moriarty? No, we're not. Moriarty thinks nothing of ending our lives. He thinks nothing of us. This is the closest he shows to regarding us in any way.
I can see why you like having them around, but then people do get so sentimental about their pets.
He treats people like livestock because to him, we are. We're not really people in the same sense that he is. However, just because Moriarty might not have a surface reason for his specific crimes, if you dig a little deeper, you find there is a reason for his worldview and outlook. See, Sherlock is something unique among the many works I've seen. While it doesn't develop our villain directly through some grand speech or flashback to their past, it does develop our villain by contrast to our hero. Throughout the first season of Sherlock, we see that our protagonist is very much on the edge of becoming like Moriarty.
One day we'll be standing around a body and Sherlock Holmes will be the one that put it there.
Why would he do that?
Because he's a psychopath. Psychopaths get bored.
Why does anyone do anything? Because I'm bored.
Frailty of genius, John. It needs an audience.
Our lives at stake. Sherlock, actual human life. Just so I know, do you care about that at all?
Well, caring about them helps save them.
Nope.
Then I'll continue not to make that mistake.
And you find that easy, do you?
Yes, very.
And by learning what it is that Sherlock had, we learn what it is that Moriarty lacked. People. And by learning what it is that Sherlock had, we learn what it is that Moriarty lacked. Peers. People to look up to. People to respect. In the criminally underrated Season 3, we learn that Sherlock and his brother both had people in their lives that were smarter than them and that grounded them. It gave them people they could respect. It gave them, however faint, a connection to humanity. Moriarty.
People do get so sentimental about their pets.
Why does anyone do anything? Because I'm bored.
I could have got them anywhere.
Didn't have that. He never really had to struggle, I don't think. Never really needed to interact with or know people except on the most basic surface level.
If you seem slow to me, Sherlock, can you imagine what real people are like? I'm living in a world of goldfish.
Became distant and uncaring and stopped relating to or even really regarding people in any way. I imagine Moriarty has seen the patterns of our lives hundreds of times. To him, we really do feel like robots on a track. Same pointless, inane conversations, the same repeated patterns, the same life stories.
I know your experiences. I know your existence. I know those things. I am a storm. You are a grain of sand. Do not even think that your existence could compare to mine.
How can you find common ground with someone struggling to keep their cafe open when destabilizing nations is now trivial to you? The reason Moriarty acts like a Let's Player messing around with random silly mods is because Moriarty has essentially 100%ed life. And look how utterly bored that has left him. He has nothing to really engage him anymore. He has nothing to fear, nothing to challenge him.
No heaven to aspire to, no hell to avoid.
His frustration with human morality is understandable if you think of how annoyed you feel when you see Peter getting on its high horse for the 50 billionth time, or when some idiot thinks that killing NPCs in a video game somehow makes you a murderer in real life. Now take all that frustration of those busybodies, and imagine you are hearing it every day, all the time, for your entire life, every time you step on a few things that mean about as much as ants to you.
People have died.
That's what people do!
Many have compared Moriarty to Heath Ledger's Joker, and it's not an unfair comparison, but this right here, this highlights to me the core difference between them. The Joker laughed at what he saw as hypocrisy of codified moral restrictions. Moriarty scoffs at the very idea of our lives having value. I said before that Moriarty is not a cartoon Disney villain, but THE cartoon Disney villain, and that statement all comes down to the all-important contrast. See, despite everything I've said until now, these people do matter, and their pain is real. And we see that. We see their fear. We see the consequences. Sherlock takes the cartoon villain's cavalier attitude towards atrocity and shows it for its bleak horror. If someone in Sherlock had an orbital death ray, it wouldn't be a mere special effects shot. It would be that world's 9/11. Even the music highlights it. When Moriarty is being casual and playful, the music is low, tense and threatening.
I've given you a glimpse, Sherlock, just a teensy glimpse of what I've got going on out there in the big bad world.
It underlines the fact that theatrical though he may be, Moriarty has ended and ruined hundreds of lives with the exact same flippancy. By taking some of the theatrics of a Disney villain, the power and the casual disregard for life, and placing them into a setting where their violent actions have a very real impact, it paints the archetype in a light that feels downright Lovecraftian. An entity with alien morals, incomprehensible intelligence and frightening power who would end your life on the slightest whim. Cartoon Disney villain shown in its truest, most nightmarish form. And so we finally come to the pool scene, and look how much it conveys. We see Moriarty's casual, flippant nature,
I could have got them anywhere.
the power and control he wields.
You've rather shown your hand there, Dr. Watson.
And his complete disregard for any kind of human life.
Sorry, boys! I'm so changeable!
It's said that a character's first scene should tell you everything you need to know about them, and this one fantastically villainous scene is a perfect showcase of my all-time favourite villain. Also, we had to wait 2 years for that cliffhanger to be resolved. I still haven't forgiven you, mother, you son of a big thank you to Nando Movies for letting me be part of this project. If you're new to my channel through this video and this playlist, well, my own channel is rather bare bones. I recommend checking out my Pathfinder campaign, The Lost Island, over on Dragonfinder Gaming. It's about two kingdoms stranded on a mysterious island with strange magics, and our heroes must solve a murder that threatens to send both kingdoms back into open war. And if RPG campaigns are your thing, I would also recommend the excellent Brony D&D / Welcome to the Show series that was run by one of my players. The seasons are displayed as playlists on my channel. It's a long one, but a good one. Thank you all for coming, and thank you once again to Nando's. It's been a pleasure. Wait. Unless he didn't include me in his playlist. Which would mean I've spent this whole time just talking in silence to nobody. Huh. Well, if nobody can hear me, I guess I'm free to rant about my political opinions. So sure!